watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. According to Russian-installed Governor Vladimir Saldo, at least 24 people were killed and 29 injured after 3 Ukrainian drones struck a hotel and cafe during New Year celebrations in the coastal village of Korli in Russia, claimed Kherson. However, Ukraine has not commented for now. According to a statement by the Somali Defense Ministry on X, Somalia's armed forces have killed 29 Al-Shabaab terrorists in Southeastern Somalia. The ministry said the operation was conducted with international partners while praising their support in security cooperation, intelligence sharing, and operations against Al-Shabaab. According to the Israeli military, Israeli forces has killed a 26-year-old Palestinian identified as Khatab al-Sarhan during an early morning operation in the occupied West Bank after opening fire on people accused of throwing stones at soldiers. According to the Chinese Foreign Ministry, China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has criticized Japan and pressed South Korea to back Beijing's One China position on Taiwan during a phone call with South Korean Foreign Minister Cho Hyun ahead of a presidential summit. Official statements from China's Taiwan Affairs Office, Beijing has condemned Taiwan leader William Lai's New Year's Day speech as full of lies and malice after he vowed to strengthen Taiwan's defenses just days after PLA live fire drills around the island. A member of Iran's security forces was killed during protests that have swept across the country since last week, local media reported. Chinese rocket maker Landspace is seeking to raise about $1 billion in Shanghai Star Market IPO after its listing application was fast-tracked and accepted by the Shanghai Stock Exchange. Landspace IPO comes as Beijing pushes aerospace as a strategic priority. Nigerian authorities said British boxer and Olympic gold medalist Anthony Joshua has been discharged from a Lagos hospital after being involved in a road crash near Lagos that killed 2 of his close associates. Local reports suggest that he was released late Wednesday and will continue recovering at home. Now we move on and we start from Ukraine and Russia. Russia has said that it has extracted and decoded a file from Ukrainian drone downed earlier this week, claiming it targeted a Russian presidential residence. Moscow has accused Kyiv of trying to strike President Vladimir Putin's residence in the Novgorod region with 91 long-range drones. Russia said the information would be shared with the United States and could influence ongoing peace talks. Ukraine and Western countries have disputed the claim, with U.S. officials reportedly finding no evidence the drone targeted Putin's residence. Kyiv has called the allegation disinformation, aimed at driving a wedge between Ukraine and Washington after a recent meeting between Trump and President Zelensky. Now for this discussion, we welcome Professor Andrew Latham. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Minneapolis. Thank you very much, Professor, for joining us, and Happy New Year to you. Now, looking at this, what do you think, what are we to make of, contradicting reports, and if Russia does prove, what comes next?
Well, it's partly the fog of war. We don't know what we don't know, and we don't know if that drone was targeted on the presidential palace or whether it was. We just don't know at this point. All parties involved have a narrative that they want to get out, and the Russian narrative is that the Ukrainians are quote-unquote terrorists, and this is what they do. They don't attack just soldiers on the battlefield. They attack politicians as well, and that's taboo under international humanitarian law. They're trying to, Putin is trying to buy time. This allows him to harden his position at the negotiating table, which buys him more time, which gives his troops on the ground the time they need to make the slow but inexorable progress that they're making on the battlefield. So that serves his purpose, and of course the reverse is also true for President Zelensky and the White House in the United States. There's a disincentive to go along with this narrative, and the counter narrative is that we didn't do anything wrong. That we the Ukrainians weren't targeting President Putin's home. So you can see that these are competing narratives, and this is the nature of gray zone warfare, or information warfare. Who's going to dominate the narrative, and which narrative is going to prevail and advance the interests of this party over that party?
Thank you for highlighting that. And Professor, now, how do you think now this report will be changing the upcoming talks between U.S. and Ukraine and U.S. and Russia?
Well, on the Russian side, as I said, it allows Putin and his delegates to dig their heels in, to say, we can't do business with these Ukrainians, they're crazy, they're terrorists, this is the kind of thing they do. And so I see this as a pretext on the Russian side to slow down those negotiations, to buy them more time. And of course, Donald Trump wants some kind of peace, any kind of peace at any kind of price. So he's not willing to go along with this. So there's going to be some friction between Moscow and Washington over this. And of course, President Zelensky has no interest in this narrative gaining traction. He doesn't want Ukraine to be perceived as a terrorist organization, terrorist state. Now, the other part of this for Putin, of course, is he likes to portray Russia as the victim rather than the aggressor. And this feeds into that narrative as well. That's NATO expansion that's the problem. It's the Ukrainians trying to join the European Union that's the problem. It's Ukraine is the aggressor. We, the Russians, are simply the victims. This plays into and reinforces that narrative. You put all of that together, you've got a lot of friction, you've got a lot of tension, and you don't have much progress towards a ceasefire or peace deal anytime soon.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Professor Andrew Latham for joining us today from Minneapolis and sharing that insight. Thank you very much. Now we move on to our next news. To Europe, dozens of people were killed and around 100 others injured, most of them seriously, after a fire tore through a packed bar during a New Year's Eve celebrations in the upscale Swiss ski resort of Crans, Montana. Eyewitnesses have described chaotic scenes as bystanders rushed to pull injured people away from the flames. Nearby bars and restaurants remained open to provide emergency shelter. Ambulances transported the injured to medical facilities in the nearby Mubra region, while those with more severe injuries were then taken to hospitals farther afield. Let's listen into what a few of the eyewitnesses have shared.
Understandably, they don't want civilians getting in and involving and getting in the way. And many were able to help carrying, I don't want to say corpses. I think everyone who was out and kind of reactive survived, but carrying bodies out of the fire from there, at least a bit further away. You see there's the Bar 1900, that was the first kind of responding place. They did amazing to stay open. It was warm in there, that was what was needed. As mentioned before, the main, I think, problem was the temperature shock from the heat inside to the cold outside. So one of the priorities was to get everyone warm. I mean, I'm talking, the curtains of the restaurant was used. And yeah, I mean, many gory scenes. There were many who were very strong, who stayed strong and who understood that their life was in grave danger, but decided that mentally it was more important to stay calm.
Il y avait des gens qui criaient, et puis voilà, des gens allongés par terre, probablement mortes, parce qu'ils avaient les vestes sur leur visage, enfin voilà. Et voilà, c'est ce que j'ai vu, c'est pas plus. Après, j'ai reçu des vidéos où il y a des gens qui essaient de s'échapper, mais ils se sont piétinés dessus, donc la sortie, c'était compliqué à sortir après. Il y a des gens qui criaient, qui disaient aidez-moi, aidez-nous s'il vous plaît.
Now we move on to Africa. Somalia's armed forces have killed 29 Al-Shabaab group people in a coordinated operation in southeastern Somalia's Jabhat Godan, according to the Defense Ministry. The operation also destroyed vehicles and weapons intended for attacks on civilians. Al-Shabaab has waged a violent insurgency since 2007, aiming to overthrow Somalia's government and impose its own strict interpretation of Sharia law. The Defense Ministry has expressed gratitude to international partners for their continued support, including intelligence sharing and operational assistance, though the specific partners were not named. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joins us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Mr. Feingold, for joining us, and Happy New Year to you. Now looking
To you too, Asuma.
Thank you. Now looking at this, the coordination between Somalian forces and international forces, although not named, what more can you tell us about this?
There's no secret here. We know that the United States, as well as countries in the region, do cooperate with the Somalia government to combat al-Shabaab and other terrorist elements in the areas that nominally the Somalia government is supposed to be controlling, although frankly their control on the ground is often very weak, and that's why al-Shabaab is able to continue to exist despite the Somalia government in Mogadishu and its international partners trying to combat al-Shabaab literally for more than a decade already. But again, it's no secret that Somalia government does have support from other countries. Otherwise, frankly, they would not be able to successfully combat al-Shabaab. But I think the key thing to keep in mind here is that despite these efforts, whether it's from the Somalia government itself or with the assistance of its international partners, al-Shabaab does not go away. It is still capable of exercising control over territory, blackmailing businesses and individuals to provide it with financial support, and it does not go away.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And what does this say about Somalia's ability to combat insurgent groups like al-Shabaab? Do you think we will see more of coordinated effort to counter al-Shabaab?
The international support or coordination has been in place for quite a long time, despite the weaknesses and other significant problems with Somalia's government. But the other countries that support Somalia's government in this effort, whether it's the United States or the Gulf countries, they have no choice. The other option would be to do nothing, not provide this support, and watch as al-Shabaab continues to take territory, continues to improve its warfighting capability, and potentially even invade Mogadishu and overthrow the government. So other countries have no choice. Even the United States under President Trump, and we all know President Trump's reluctance to get involved on the ground in other countries, which is a different discussion from things like what President Trump is ordering with regard to Venezuela at the moment. But the United States, even under President Trump, remains deeply involved in supporting anti-terrorism efforts in Somalia. And there's no choice, because the only other option would be don't support the central government in Somalia and watch as al-Shabaab takes over larger amounts of territory.
And what political challenges does Somalia still face in balancing military action with civilian protection?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question to ask now, because it comes days after Israel announced that it would recognize Somaliland, which is a self-governing portion of Somalia that has been self-governing for over 30 years, has had democratic elections, and has a lot of international sympathy. But at the same time, a lot of governments, including President Trump, when he was asked about this a few days ago, they're really reluctant to recognize Somaliland diplomatically because they know it would weaken the government in Mogadishu. And if the government in Mogadishu is weakened, it really would result in significant territorial gains by al-Shabaab, which is not a result that the international community wants, whether that's the United States, the Gulf countries, or other countries nearby in Africa. So the problems of Somalia, which have been going on now for decades, it won't go away, but the key thing here at the moment is a number of countries, including the United States, they remain committed to supporting the central government in Mogadishu.
Thank you very much, Mr. Feingold, for sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, moving the focus on to South America, Brazil's Supreme Court has rejected former President Jair Bolsonaro's request to convert his prison sentence for plotting a coup to house arrest. Bolsonaro's lawyers have submitted the request, citing a real risk of a sudden worsening in health for the far-right ex-leader as the reason to serve his 27-year sentence at home. Bolsonaro has been hospitalized for more than a week after undergoing surgery for a groin hernia and then a procedure to treat recurring bouts of hiccups. Bolsonaro is in jail as Brazil's Supreme Court in September found Bolsonaro guilty of conspiring to stay in power after losing 2022 elections to the current president, Lula da Silva. Now for this discussion, we welcome back Mr. Ross Feingold. He's a political analyst, joined us live from Taipei. Thank you very much, Mr. Feingold, for staying with us. Now looking at this, what does the Supreme Court's decision, Brazilian Supreme Court's decision indicate about, this independence in Brazil's political system now, and how do you think what will Bolsonaro's lawyers have to do now?
In regards to the first part of your question, the ultimate result is going to be that this cleavage, this disagreement in Brazilian society will only deepen. Bolsonaro supporters will see this as a political and not a legal or judicial decision. They will see it as a political persecution of Bolsonaro. And Lula, the incumbent president's supporters, will see this as the appropriate decision because of their dislike for Bolsonaro. So that deep disagreement in Brazilian society will not change, and it will only worsen as a result of this decision. With regard to the latter part of your question, as far as what his lawyers are going to do, or his supporters, or his sons who are very involved in Brazilian politics as well, it's very clear what they're going to do. They're going to go to the United States. And President Trump has been very outspoken in his support for Bolsonaro. He's been very outspoken in his dislike for Lula. So in the aftermath of this decision, I think the key thing to watch is, what does President Trump say, and what does the United States government do? What do they do by way of punishing Lula's government? And there are a number of different options that the U.S. government could pursue beyond simply making angry statements, whether that's a spokesperson at the State Department or the White House, or President Trump making statements on social media. There are a number of substantive actions that the United States government could take in the aftermath of this decision, and that really is the key thing to watch for. What is the level of support from the Trump administration for Bolsonaro?
And how is Bolsonaro's imprisonment affecting the political polarization and Brazil's public opinion now?
You used the key word, polarization, and that's the situation in Brazil. And they have a presidential election scheduled for later this year. It's scheduled for October 2026. And Lula initially said he wouldn't seek re-election. Now he's saying, or he's previously said, that he changed his mind. He will seek re-election. And this polarization in Brazilian society is going to deepen. That is very, very clear. And unfortunately, they have an extended period where this cleavage, this polarization will deepen. From today, it's January 1st, all the way up to the presidential election. Whoever wins, the losing side will claim fraud, or they'll claim it was unfair. Their supporters will take to the streets possibly. So the polarization in Brazilian society will be very, very extreme going forward, which is unfortunate given the size of Brazil, not just by population, but its economy and its importance in South America. And it's not good for the region for Brazil to be so polarized.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that. And lastly, just a general question. What are the potential implications for a democracy when former leaders like Bolsonaro are persecuted for attempting to undermine election results?
We see this in different parts of the world, whether it's a prosecution for undermining election results, or for allegations of corruption. For example, right now in South Korea, the former president is facing legal charges for trying to impose martial law, as well as allegations of corruption against him, as well as his wife, the former first lady. So this is a trend around the world where even in democratic countries or countries we normally think of as democracies, that former leaders do come under judicial scrutiny and potentially even face criminal charges by their successors. Is that going to change in the near term? No, that's probably the trend and it's not going to go away.
Right. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Ross Feingold for joining us as a political analyst from Taipei. Thank you very much. Now we move on to Europe. Bulgaria has officially entered the Eurozone, with the euro being adopted as the country's currency. The move was marked with fireworks and projections of euro coins in the central bank's building in Sofia. However, Bulgaria becomes the Eurozone's 21st member, lifting the number of people using the single currency to more than 350 million people and granting the country a seat on the European Central Bank's Governing Council. The step comes nearly 2 decades after Bulgaria joined the European Union, though public opinion remains divided amid concerns over prices and ongoing political instability. Let's listen in.
Ние сме в Европа и нашето място е там. Друг въпрос е, че нашата история е доста така трудна, защото се увличаме в някои посоки. Човек, докато е жив, винаги се надява. Правихме социализъм, комунизъм, не го виждам да се е получил. Еврозоната е нашето място, България.
Съвсем обективните причини, заради може би в момента е най-неподходящия момент предвид ситуацията в цяла Европа. Това ми са ми притесненията, иначе не мисля, че някой нещо има против еврото като евро, а неподходящия момент. А и в крайна сметка обезличаването на лева, затриването на лева в рамките на един месец, не мисля, че това е най-доброто.
Ние сме в еврозоната от 2007 година, няма как да не искаме, но трябваше, нали, референдум.
Now we move on to our next news. Elon Musk's brain implant company Neuralink has announced plans to begin high-volume production of its brain-computer interface devices in 2026, with surgical procedures set to be almost fully automated. The update was shared by Musk on social media, calling the shift a major breakthrough. Meanwhile, the implants already tested in 12 people are designed to help patients with paralysis and neurological conditions communicate and control digital devices. However, Neuralink says the chips can be implanted without removing the brain's protective layer. The move follows major funding and regulatory support as the company looks to rapidly expand human trials. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX.